that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody, and welcome not back to the Expanded Universe. Welcome back to Fanfiction Universe 2, a possible third timeline that's not canon to Disney or to Legends. It's its own separate thing, but it's a possible story that could exist in a version of the Expanded Universe. Today, for you, I have Star Wars Destinies by HOT45. It is another fanfiction. This is the first fanfiction, at least if we're going by how it looks like on the page, that HOT45 ever wrote. And it is another story that takes place after the Dark Mass trilogy. This story accomplishes a lot of things, and I think it does it fairly well. It gives, for someone who, and this has been purported by a lot of people, there's not really any interviews with HOT45. I think there's like one floating out there, but he's notoriously not a fan of the stories set after New Jedi Order, like a lot of other fans are. It's very 50-50, but on the internet it will seem like it's everybody, but it's not. But like Meg Reviews just did by the time of this recording, did her post-mortem review of all NJO stories, and I enjoyed her video quite a bit. Didn't agree with it, but she gave some really good points on some things and other. But as an EU writer, if the EU were to be continued, you don't erase things and say, let's just do it because that's lazy. Then you can just, mistakes, fix them. Silly things, fix them. Jedi Prince is really silly. It exists in the same universe as New Jedi Order, right? So you just make that better in retrospect. Like Lord Shadowspawn from Mindor actually worked with the Prophets of the Dark Side. So when Shadowspawn was with the Prophets of the Dark Side, they made actual real prophecies. So people came to trust in their status, But then Lord Shadowspawn leaves. So they don't have that anymore, but they already have the trust of people because they've already been making accurate predictions. So now they're just saying whatever, like it's all bullcrap. But people trust in them because they already established trust when they had someone actually predicting things. You see what I mean? So like it makes something silly, and it makes it slightly more tolerable, So the same thing, even if you don't like certain things, right? Isn't it better to work around that and make something compelling, even if you despise something? Because that's pretty much where this guy's at. But at the same time, man, does he make quite a compelling and engaging story to help further the story moving along. Not only do we get some final scenes between Mara and Talon Card and stuff, and basically this whole premise came off the fact, like the initial premise, there's a lot of things he did himself, but the initial premise was that Zahn at one point wanted to do a story with Mara, Luke, and Ben that would be like one big family adventure. And so we kind of get that here, but we also get a lot of other things, which is great. We get a lot of, not development, but a lot more of Mara, because what the next series does gives us a lot more of Mara here, before that next big series. Jason, for all the problems that this author most definitely has with that story, he makes a really compelling story whenever it comes to Jason and his character development toward that series. He actually enhances that plot, makes it more plausible, better, gets into his head, gets into his reasoning, makes it more of an acceptable thing, even if you don't accept it, which I appreciate, because he clearly isn't a fan, but he's trying to work with it and make it better. So that's really cool. The other big thing, the biggest thing here, we have a character in the Legacy comics who pops up, and he's just a part of the Jedi Order. We don't really have an explanation for how he returned to the Jedi Order, and that is Master Cook Crook. So within this adventure, there's a lot of things going on. Tino Ka's daughter, her blood sample's been taken. She's kidnapped for a second, but she's fine, because all Solos and all Skywalkers must deal with being kidnapped. But she's fine. That's not really the big point of the story. Or sorry, it wasn't her. It was Isildur, or Isildur. The father was kidnapped. My bad. But they save him. But the problem is that this guy named Pax V, who this is kind of a retcon, but he um, was a part of the Jedi Order during the Shadow Academy story. But he was never super strong in the Force, and he didn't really care about the Jedi Order. So after that scary event with the Shadow Academy, he kind of just bailed. So he's not a very strong Force user. He just kind of do a couple tricks here and there. But he became like a sort of con artist, worked with low lives and stuff. And he's working for higher ups that he doesn't really know about, but he's getting paid good money for it. So it kind of becomes this whole thing where Ben and um, Luke and Mara are doing this one thing. Tino Khan and Jason are trying to figure this all out because, of course, they need to keep it a secret. And it all kind of converges on this planet, which has Kukruk on it, who's been living there for a long time, and his backstory and everything that, because there's a big, large gap in between the last time we saw him to this story. So there's a lot of tragedy and sadness and redemption. Not redemption, but like overcoming sadness to by the end of the story, he's going to wander the stars for a bit, but eventually he'll join the Jedi Order, kind of like Zek does when he leaves for a time after the Shadow Academy arc, and he becomes a bounty hunter, and then he eventually becomes a Jedi. But Kruk's not going to become a bounty hunter, he's just going to explore what he's been missing for the past 40 years. But anyway, in between all that, kind of the revelation we get here is that the people working behind the scenes, even though the main characters don't get to really learn this, not even Jason, he's trying to figure that out. It's actually making him more actively nervous and scared and kind of helping for that descent, is the fact that the one Sith are behind this. Warlock, some new ones that aren't in the comics, but I mean, there's a bunch of one Siths, so you can just come up with new characters. But they're all trying to make clones, which at first I was like, that seems rather fanfiction-y, doesn't it? To just like clones, but then they kept talking about it, and I realized, oh, it's trying to actually fill in a gap from the Paul S. Kemp duology that takes place after Legacy of the Force. Because in the Paul S. Kemp duology, they find a cloning facility that it is originally a Thrawn facility, but it has to be worked on in present day because stuff's been going on. Thrawn's been dead for a long time, so somebody picked it up after the fact and has been using it. It was the one Sith. They were trying to make clones. In fact, if I'm going right by what 45 is trying to do, what I'm thinking here is they're trying to get clones that don't go insane for one purpose. This might be what he's doing, I don't know. I haven't read the stories set after Crucible by Hand of Thrawn 45, which are all fan fiction, by the way. But if they can figure out how to make a clone that doesn't go insane, they can clone Darth Krayt. By cloning Darth Krayt, they can make Krayt eventually fight Luke and everyone. So that way he can die, and the Jedi Order, for all intents and purposes, can think that they have peace and that there's no threat. So that way it makes sense why Krayt, the real one, or the clone, doesn't really matter, can show up in Fate of the Jedi, and then have it so why didn't Luke stop him? There was all this time before the Legacy comics. Well, if they killed a clone, and they thought they actually killed him, that would be that. That's the thing. I think that's something they're trying to do there. But regardless, it ties into the Paul S. Kemp stuff and actually makes that make a little bit more sense. So that's actually really cool. So all this to say, there's a bunch of different plot threads going on here to kind of make one interesting story, and I think most of it works. I have to say, Jason, I don't mind the transition, but if you're somebody like if you're somebody like Meg Reviews or other people who feel that way, Hand of Thrawn 45 is your guy. He agrees with you, like 110%. But he still makes a compelling story regardless out of that. Like if you're gonna work with it, might as well try to make it better. And he does. He does it. I mean, I already thought it was great, but he does a really good job with some scenes in here. There's some scenes in here that rival. There's one scene in particular with Jason and Pax Veem at near the end of the story. I'll get into in the spoiler section, but it is superb in how it handles everything there, and it was a phenomenal scene between those two. So overall, it's another adventure set before Legacy of the Force. One more story before things go even more dour, and also setting up things for future stories to make it even more interesting. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, check it out. Is it canon? No. Neither was the Shadowed War or whatever it was called, and neither was Attrition that I just read. But at the same time, until we get new stories, if you want stories to kind of give you some satisfaction until we can get more, HOT45 is kind of your guy. It's written well enough to where it feels like something that might actually be written in the EU. It doesn't feel very amateur. There's some typos here and there, but that, it's a fan fiction. He's writing it for free, and, so inevitably there's going to be some hiccups here and there. Also, Chance Calrissian is like in a sentence, but Chance Calrissian is not born yet. So little things like that be looked over. But other than that, right, like it's a mostly fun little story that actually further enhances character development and makes you appreciate certain things more and makes it more nuanced and interesting. So if that interests you, definitely worth your time. I'm gonna get into spoilers now. If you don't want spoilers, just go to fanfiction.net. You can read it for free. It's a fan fiction after all. Enjoy. Okay. Jason and Ben. This, again, the stories we've missed, this just gives a little bit of Jason and Ben going on missions together. Imagine if we got an actual series on that, like a Jedi Apprentice type of Jason and Ben. Oh, it'd be so good. But we get to see a little bit of that here. I already talked about Backstreams and stuff. So this is 3 years after the Swarm War, which means there's 4 years worth of stories, right? So, there's the 2 years prior to this story, and 2 years after, before Legacy of the Force, where we could have stories about Jason and Ben going on adventures, doing stuff. It'd be so good. It must really suck. There's parts in here where, Jason goes to visit Tino Ka and Alana calls him Uncle Jason. How hard must it be? You're holding your daughter in your arms, and she has no idea who you really are. Again, it's reiterated here. It's also reiterated in Dark Nest, which is official. Everybody thinks, even Luke, who has disagreements with Jason, they all consider him still to be this great Jedi that he was at the end of the Unifying Force. No one thinks he isn't a great Jedi, because he's not a bad guy right now. Mara and Jason, this is the third time. This is maybe a fanfiction, but just like in Dark Nest, this really helps to just show the bond that Mara and Jason has. And it really makes sense to why Mara really held off so long in Legacy of the Force to suspecting anything with Jason, because they're very similar. They had a similar hard childhood and stuff, and Mara's a bit more unorthodox, and she's willing to do a lot more things than her husband is, but she still always remains in the light. We also get to see Card and Shada and Mara interact along with Mazik, which is just really nice to see again. The Fate of the Jedi retcon is used here in this story since, of course, HOT45 already knows about it. Why not include that? So, part of the thing is, we learn about that dark vision of the Dark Man. And after the story, Jason even considers maybe it was that whoever these people are trying to make clones of my daughter for whatever evil, sadistic purpose they have down the line. But regardless, there's something out there that needs to be stopped. If anything, if you think about it, if you try to use this in the right way, Jason becoming Darkseid is ultimately like Leto Atreides II from God Emperor, who became a giant worm monster and put 1,000 years of oppression, but to save everyone, to put everybody on the golden path. If you don't know Dune, you know what I'm talking about, but the point being is, Leto II was never a villain, necessarily. Everything he did was for a greater cause. Tino Ka and Jason have a flashback, which was really sweet and nice to see. I'm just showing him back when he was, and this would actually be great, because me and Brennan are writing a fanfiction set before the events of New Jedi Order. I could totally see this little thing being at the end of it, like right before New Jedi Order, because they're gonna break up in our fanfiction. But she wants to express to him that, because now he's become so focused on his studies and how we see him in New Jedi Order, but she wants the Jason that she fell in love with. She wants to, you know, kind of express that she still wants him, but she can't, because he just kind of becomes so different. And so that was a great scene. And I, like, personally, I would, like, that would be a headcanon, like, for my fanfiction, like, at the end of that, you know, after they break up and everything, right before New Jedi Order, she wants to try to rekindle something that they lost, but it just can't work out. Krook's backstory is really sad. Krook, we learn, and it's really depressing, but, like, at the same time, like, it was the Dark Times. Just a couple years after where we see him in the comics of Dark Times, the Empire is fully established. There's this proto-rebellion, not the rebellion that we know from the original trilogy, but, like, rebellion. Whatever's left of the Separatists are working with a couple other people, and they settle on a base on a planet nearby where Krook's at. So he has a spark with the dark side, and the dark side wins, where he goes, I don't have any purpose anymore. I don't have the Jedi Order. I only have these kids. They need me. I need to protect them. So he tells, anonymously, the Empire exactly where these rebels are, so they could be killed, taken out, and they can hopefully leave the system alone, and he can live in peace with his students. So they do. They decimate the rebels, but they checked every nearby system and planet just in case. So he comes back home. Zhao, all the kids, dead. So he leaves, travels to another planet, finds these tribal people. They kind of look up to him as a godlike figure. He doesn't want to be that, but he does decide to be the protector. And so that's where he's at until they find him in this story. But it's just a really sad backstory. But at the same time, I kind of love that. And Jason admires Mara, as I said before, because they're kind of two peas in a pod. Like, Mara's the one that gets him the most, and he kind of understands what he's going through. And he admires that Mara's, like, not as orthodox as Luke, but he still gets frustrated with her because she still kind of uses the dichotomy of light and dark, because they reverted back to that in Dark Nest. But, you know, because he strictly does not agree that there is light or dark side. There's only darkness within you, or there's no darkness at all. There's no external force. That's what Unifying Force is trying to get at. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you stand on. That was his stance, and that was Vizier's stance. They reiterated it time and time again in Unifying Force. The stance is there is no light or dark side. It has been a myth. You've all been wrong. That's not it. That is what they were getting at. So that's his belief, and that's his belief in this fan fiction. But Mara, you know, she says, you know, I struggle with the darkness, but ultimately I have the self-control to always overcome it. And he admires her for being able to teeter on that and not do that, but at the same time he's like, but there's no teetering. Just like, you just are, you aren't. You don't have to worry, Mara. Stop worrying about doing something like that, because you won't, because Mara, you're a good person, so you would never fall. You know, that's his, you know, that's his viewpoint. You're either good or you're not. There's no external force, but no one else believes that. So he feels really alone, which is a recurring theme. And the ending. Jason's murder. They find Pax Vim at the end, where he's by himself. He's cornered him, and it's just an amazing scene. I can't even do it justice. But he thinks about, you know, he could kill he breaks the data disk with all the information about him as a father, but he could always talk in prison. And he hesitates. He doesn't want to kill anybody needlessly. But if it's between that and his daughter's safety, his daughter comes first every time. So he cuts his head off, sits there for a long time, hoping the Force would tell him that he's right or wrong, something. But instead he feels emptiness, because the Force says nothing. And he leaves to go protect the people he loves. That's paraphrasing, but it's a phenomenal scene. My favorite scene in the fan fiction. Overall, I really enjoyed it. Do I count it as canon? No. My brain can't do that. But as an alternative what-if story, I really liked it. I like that it remains in continuity, or tries to be in continuity with the rest of the expanded universe. So that's the only type of fan fiction I could read, is one that tries to remain consistent. I couldn't read anything that was like, oh, what if Anakin survived? What if Jason didn't turn to the dark side? Because that's not what happened. So if I'm going to read a fan fiction, it has to try to adhere to continuity. So, but overall, I really enjoyed it, and I do highly recommend this one. Till next time, guys, may the Force be with you.